Gaddafi, Madagascar, Malawi.
Yeah. Welcome back to Sahara FM Radio and Conscious Vibes. This is actually Fungai standing in for Conscious Vibes, who stepped out shortly. Coming back, we're going to go straight into our program. Today we have one of our regular guests. His name is Daddy B. In fact, Bosco. He's calling all the way from Ghana. Bosco, how are you doing?
Fine. How are you doing too, my brother?
Good. And just for those listeners who don't know who Bosco is, he's actually the administrator for the Musicians Union of Ghana, and he's also a recorded artist. Bosco, how's everything today?
God is good. It's a good day.
Okay. Like I said, Conscious Vibes, Kwesi stepped out. He should be joining us later on today, but we're going to go straight into it. This past week, we marked the second anniversary since the death of Libya's president, that was Muammar Gaddafi. And obviously, for those who are in the know, you know that Gaddafi had taken power some 40 or something odd years ago, and Libya was basically economically not that good. But when he took over, I mean, he did some tricks and changed the economy to a point where the Libyans were receiving some form of money coming from the oil revenue. And I'm talking about each household. And he had empowered the women. There were no Islamic restrictions that restricted the women in terms of stepping up to the plate in the economics and the politics of the country. We could go on about the positives, but of course, throughout the Western world, he was the West tyrant, the dictator, and all that. And now after his death, we've realized that black Africans are getting picked up from the streets randomly, locked up with no charges, and they're basically wallowing in prisons. We've realized that there's been obviously gross instability within the country and also the region since after his death. And you know that NATO was involved in obviously taking him out. So we want to hear from you, Bosco, what your ideas and your feelings about this situation will be.
Thank you for this opportunity. And personally, I've been of the view that the removal of Mr. Gaddafi was not, let me put it, the situation to as it were, deal with any crisis of a sort in Libya. Because as we speak right now, the situation in Libya is pretty precarious. I mean, how can you have a situation where a prime minister is abducted? I mean, that is pretty anarchic. And for me, if you ask me, that is indicative of how much Gaddafi was able to hold Libya together and to be able to maintain a certain civility within that body politics. Now, having said all that, one, you see, there's this suggestion doing the rounds that Mr. Gaddafi was moved from power because his Pan-African politics was becoming unbecoming, you know, and that the West had, quote unquote, tolerated him for such a long time, you know, and it's only when he appeared to be pushing the Pan-African agenda very, very aggressively that he appears to have been taken off the scene. So, for me, in a nutshell, the happenings in Libya that led to the overthrow of Gaddafi and the post-Gaddafi overthrow happenings show for me that it's important that Africa or Africans as a people should start looking very critically at our national security, our Pan-African security, and above all, our governance issues. Are we going to continue assessing or evaluating our governance through the spectacles of the West, or we will do a critical and in-depth analysis of our history, our situation, and our possible future as a people to find out how best to handle these governance challenges that confront us. Why am I saying this? Because in the past, the African was governed by the chieftaincy system, where there was a lot of consensus building and stuff like that. And so, for some of us, the African seems to be in a quandary because we've left our cultural, our cultural governance systems, and we've embraced an alien concept of governance. And that appears to be one of the situations that are staring us in the face post-Gaddafi in Libya.
Okay, so we're just going to take a short break because Conscious Vybz has just stepped back into his scene. So after the musical interlude, we're going to get right back into the subject of Libya. And 2 years after Gaddafi's death, we have obviously our big brother, Daddy Bosco, calling directly from Ghana. So please stay tuned. Okay, we're right back, and this is Conscious Vibes. I'd just like to welcome back Jahbeloved, the star of this show. How are you doing?
Yes, sir. Fungai, thank you very much for holding the seat. I don't know if I'm the star of the show, though.
Well, we also have, obviously, Daddy B, all the way in Ghana. Daddy B, what's up? Daddy Bosco, can you hear us?
Yes, brother, what's up?
Good. So I'm saying Jahbeloved is back on the seat now. So we're just going to give an overview of exactly what we were discussing. And this is Libya, 2 years after the demise of its leader, Muammar Gaddafi. And we've obviously been talking about how Africans should unite in protection of, the internal security of how a sitting leader can just be taken out like that. So Jahbeloved is just going to jump right into the deep end and
Yes,
flow.
indeed. I'm going to join the discussion, definitely. But talking about stars of the show, I'd like to pay glorious tribute to the people who make this show take. Nick Shileshe, Sami Amakri, of course, the executive producer, Omoyele Shawore, also Effie, who is on social media. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And of course, yourself, Fungai. I mean, there will be no Conscious Vibes without this team. And Jonathan and a few more people that I cannot spend all the time mentioning right now. But yes, we here on www.saharafmradio.com, Conscious Vibes every Wednesday, 4 to 5 New York time, as in EST. All right, Daddy Bosco.
Yes, Lion.
Yes, man. So let's pick up the discussion. We're gonna, this is FaceTime with you, so we're not gonna just dwell on issues. We're also gonna go into your own philosophies and your own lessons of life that you have to share with us. So, yep, definitely. So yeah, my colleague Fungai was talking to you about Gaddafi and all of that. I am particularly interested also in the philosophy of Thomas Sankara. Just next door to the north of Ghana, we had this vibrant leader whose ideas were, just like fantastic, if you ask me.
Right.
Along the line, he was taken out by the man who was his right-hand man and who is still the president of the country today. Is Africa suffering from that? Are we suffering from buyout leaders? Leaders that can easily be bought out to betray the ideals that we believe in, because Blaise Compaoré definitely was with Thomas Sankara. He was propagating the same agenda, and then he just turned around. Are we suffering from that?
The Thomas Sankara phenomenon is something that one has to appreciate for what it is, a phenomenon. Now, Thomas Sankara was a unique individual, and sometimes it goes without saying that some of these people might not live as long as we expect them. Now, having said that, the current crop of leaders in Africa, and time and again, when we reason amongst ourselves, we ask ourselves, this question, whether the African leaders of today really have the continent at heart, and whether their dreams of what the continent should become does not include a transformation of the lives of the people, So you find out that you have a crop of leaders who, for instance, look at Sankara. One of the things that he stood for, which is, anytime one talks of Sankara, that thing comes to my mind is quest for food security.
Yep.
His quest for food security.
Yes.
And that is something that, maybe an African leader would not touch on food security and make it a passionate, what you call it, obsession.
Yep.
So what it is you are finally like lost for words to express what the current crop of African leaders
Daddy Bosco,
have as a vision.
let me chip in here. It's very interesting that you mentioned food security in connection with Thomas Sankara, because after Thomas Sankara is gone, we have Burkina Faso as one of the biggest proponents of the genetically modified foods in Africa. And that is definitely not the dream that Thomas Sankara had. It's just like a 360 roundabout by the man who was his right-hand man.
You know? And what it is, you see, that's what I said, that many times you wonder what the African leaders really have in mind, whether they fully appreciate the enormity of the challenges confronting the average African, and whether they have the wherewithal to fix these challenges.
Very good, very good submission. Again, Thomas Sankara was also a very huge proponent of what in Ghana we called Yentia. Thomas Sankara stood up and said to the other African leaders, the debt that Africa owes to the West is not right. This debt was brought on by circumstances that is unfair to the Africans. So let us collectively step up to these Western leaders and say, we cannot pay the money. We are not going to pay.
Right.
And now that, we had that same thing in Ghana in some form. But what's your own thought about that? You think that is something, people say it's undiplomatic or whatever. What's your own thoughts on that mindset?
Now, what it is, you see, the debt of African countries has to be renegotiated. I clearly remember back in the 70s when Colonel Chiampong proclaimed that we were not going to pay back the debts we owe because of some of the reasons you've mentioned. Now, what the African needs to do right now is appreciate that, look, we need to sit down with these guys and renegotiate a lot of things. For me, that's the way forward. Sit down, renegotiate a lot of these things, and then clear them off the table.
That comes, as has been said by other people, in the form of like reparation, right? After 400 years and over of slavery, other people have, stepped up and say, Africa deserves reparation. Japan suffered an atomic bomb blast, and they had reparations for that. There were 6 million Jews who lost their lives in the Holocaust. They had reparations for that. Africa, 400 years and over, no reparations for the African, home or abroad. How does this tie in? And I would like you to comment on that too, Fungai, after Daddy Bosco takes his place.
Okay. Go ahead, Daddy Bosco.
Now, what it is currently CARICOM is putting together like a request to seek some reparations. That's on one front. Now, the whole reparations issue is something that I think the continental African governments, the governments of the AU, have to take up. They shouldn't just leave it to the Caribbean countries to look at. But the continental African governments should take it upon themselves, because they are owed a huge amount of reparations, even for the rape and plunder of their societies. It's absolutely important that the African governments champion this cause for reparations, and they link up with whichever countries or whichever, what you call it, partners they can make worldwide. Like I mentioned earlier on, CARICOM is seriously working on that project. And then together realize the aspirations of their people in terms of reparation.
Fantastic.
Yeah, now also to chime in on that, it takes us back to obviously the AU, as you are saying, Daddy Bosco. where you question now whether this African unity is really united, in terms of being together and meaning one thing. So we see that certain countries, their leaders would not want to be seen or heard upsetting the West. They have shown in the past, in fact, in recent years, where if they was an outstanding or outspoken, rather, let me put it that way, leader amongst the African community, they would sit quietly. They would not comment. They would not support publicly, what he's saying, but privately would then show their support. And then privately, when they meet as the AU, you wonder where the votes of support of this same president who's been openly castigating the West and denouncing some of these things, like where is the support coming from? But when it happens publicly, when he stands up, they don't show up. So I feel that there's a tendency of wanting to play hide and seek. There's a tendency of wanting not to be straight up, to come up and represent their true feelings because of fear,
because of colonial connections which still exist. Do you think that those colonial
colonial links
still exist?
Yeah.
In one word, do you think
I think the strings that control that colonial mentality are still attached?
Okay.
And definitely until those have been let go, then Africa can truly stand up and have a backbone. I'm saying this just to say that we've seen that Mugabe, because right now we're talking about Libya, we're talking about Thomas Sankara. These were the leaders in Africa who had stood up, and whatever they said, the West would not listen. The West was not happy with what they would say. Were they not? I'm not sure about Sankara, but in terms of Libya, they were associated with tyranny, dictatorship, because for Gaddafi had been in power for 40 years or so. Mugabe is in power for 34 years.
Let's cut to Mugabe.
So
let's go to
Mugabe, in fact, today is the one who's, denouncing publicly when he's invited to the United Nations, when he give a speech somewhere, he's castigating the West, the imperialists, and he doesn't mince his words. He says it, and to a silent applause from certain African leaders.
I like that word, silent applause.
It's silent applause because they never come up and say, well done. They never come up and say, why did you say? But the actions show
that they support
But
Mugabe.
the action, you can feel.
Let's ask Daddy Bosco. Daddy Bosco, how do you assess Robert Mugabe and his leadership of Zimbabwe?
Mr. Mugabe, to a certain extent, is a victim of propaganda. And also a victim of circumstances. Why am I saying this? Victim of propaganda. The Western media, it looks as if they have an agenda. That's what I'll say. It looks like, there's a propaganda out there to, as it were, portray a certain, how should I say, a certain impression, if I may say so. So I think the Mugabe thing has to be discussed and analyzed in a proper context. Because what Mr. Mugabe is doing is simple. He's reclaiming the lands that were taken away forcibly from the people. Bottom line. That is what he's doing. Somebody may argue about the modalities.
Right.
But the long and short is that 5% or 10% of a society cannot own over 80% of the land. That in adult. So that is what my uncle Mugabe is doing. His MO, that is his modus operandi, may be a bit on the other side, but I believe he's pursuing a great objective for Africa.
Do you still consider him a freedom fighter for Africa?
Oh yes, that's what he's doing. He's fighting for freedom of Africa. You know something? It takes somebody to stand up to somebody to say, look, no more. You cannot tolerate anymore.
Okay.
You know, and that's what Mr. Mugabe has done. He stood up.
All right.
Yeah.
Briefly, Fungai, let's. Do you agree with what Daddy Bosco is saying? Briefly.
Well, in context, I would agree because fighting for the African liberation,
Yep.
I would say he is doing that because the land issue. In fact, in any wars that we can look out, throughout the world, is about the land. So if that land issue is never addressed, there is always going to be war. I don't know of any wars that are out there that do not involve the land. So the Zimbabwean land issue had to come to that point at some time. We have things about the strategy at which we would ask ourselves, was this the best strategy?
Well,
that
that's what Bosco was saying as well.
Right.
The modalities,
Right. So, Daddy Bosco talks about Mugabe being a victim of propaganda. I don't know if he's opening his eyes to see if Mugabe is also preaching propaganda, because in the last campaign, it was about the imperialists did this to us, the colonialists, did that to us. It's a blame game, because
But
if you're
are these
given,
not
if you're,
facts?
if they're factual to a certain degree, where it's been 34 years, and mind you, Zimbabwe had been in under colonial rule for almost 100 years before that, and obviously they had to pick up arms and fight. So now people would say, well, Mugabe has only been there for 34 years. Why is there people complaining? But at the time, I think the responsibility would have to fall into the Zimbabwean people themselves and the Africans who are standing by and watching to find a way, because Zimbabweans are really suffering. And if you ask them, is this because of the sanctions? Well, that's what Mugabe's campaign was about. Is because of the sanctions, because of the imperialists. Now, Zimbabwe is being invaded by Chinese. We've got others as well that are there. So, after a few years from now, are we going to say it's the Chinese? What are we going to say? So it's the moment
Fungai, let me ask you one simple fundamental question. How many people are there in Zimbabwe? What's the population?
Well, rough give and take about 14 million, maybe.
Wow, 40 million.
14.
14.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. 14 million people.
Most
can't
of
be
them
wrong.
have left the country. Right.
I mean, the mere fact that people still repose confidence in him, in spite of all these sanctions, doesn't that say something?
Well, there's talk that these past elections were heavily rigged, but then that's a totally different area to go to, because
We hear that
it
all the
happened
time.
in plain sight.
We hear that all the time.
So,
Anyway, let's push forward.
So we can go in and go on.
We can. Let's push forward. At least I know, different angles to the subject, and at least there's the central point is that almost everybody agrees that the land needs to be returned to its rightful owners. I think that's basic. Daddy B.
Yeah.
When I mention Agege, what comes to your mind?
When you mention Agege,
Yes.
and Agege is the name of a Nigerian community that came to the fore, especially in Ghana, when Hope Road, the 86 Hope Road address, was taken over by Bob Marley.
Hello?
Yeah. I think
Hello, Daddy B.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I missed the last part of what you said, but let's do this. In 1983, Pope John Paul II visited Ghana. He bowed and kissed the tarmac, and it did not rain for a very long time after that. I mean, people are kind of, people attach significance to that. But whether it was a coincidence or whatever,
Was this
it's on
kiss a
record.
blessing or a curse? What are you trying
Well,
to
that's
say?
what I'm trying to get at. He bowed down to kiss the ground, and people, at least, let's detach those two things. But he did come to Ghana, and it didn't rain for a very long time in Ghana in 1983. Ghana suffered a famine, a massive drought. On top of this, thousands and thousands of young Ghanaians were deported from Nigeria, and they came back to Ghana with red, keen eyes. Some of them came singing, and some of them came to form the band SOZ, Sons of Zion. Do you find yourself in this picture, Daddy B?
And you see, what it is, let me put it this way. Agege is something that now has become like, for instance, there's a town in Ghana called Agege. Mm-hmm. And for me, the whole good thing about that whole experience or exercise is that you had people who came back and had to immediately innovate as to how to reintegrate themselves in the society. As to whether one is looking forward to another Agege would be the vice versa situation. There is the only way that I see that, But on a whole, Agege thing, or that, what you call it, expulsion of Ghanaians from Nigeria was a reprise.
It was.
Based on what Ghana had done earlier.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think the long and short is that individual African governments have to fast track the AU's roadmap to regional, a continental integration, so that our peoples, as African peoples, can be free to move from Cape to Cairo, from Dakar to what you call it,
Addis or somewhere on the coast.
That's right.
Okay.
That for me is the most
all right. But were you in Nigeria yourself at that time? Were you?
Oh yes, I lived in Nigeria for close on 3 years, from 1981 to I think 83. Yeah.
And
I was in Nigeria.
people link the booming of reggae music and the Rastafari culture in Ghana to these people who came from Nigeria. Is this factual?
Well, what it is around that time, the Nigerian music industry, just as it is now, was thriving. And reggae was cutting it. I clearly remember the works of Rastafarianism, during those days, Under Pressure, Bamba Style, all those songs were big. So when the people returned from Nigeria, and remember in Nigeria, people had the liberty to grow their locks. Whereas in Ghana, because of societal pressure, family pressure, etc., people were hesitant to wear dreadlocks. So someone goes to Nigeria for 3, 4, 5 years, is catering for himself. No matter auntie or whatever is telling him what to do with his life. Naturally, most youth who have that inclination to dreadlocks would gravitate towards dreadlocks. And in those days, it was dreadlocks or Rastafari and reggae music. Two went hand in hand.
So there's definitely a link then, if you ask me.
Oh, most certainly, I would not deny it.
Okay. Fungai, what's the Rastafari community like in Zimbabwe? Do you know?
Yeah, we have quite a prominent community that obviously, is Rastafarian. So, like you obviously know that Bob Marley was the
Yep.
special musician for
Yep.
our independence, and I'm talking of 30-something years ago, and he penned the song Zimbabwe. You know, that wherever you go, the lyrics are relevant now, just as they were relevant then. So it's become like a religion, you know, besides the Christianity and all that. And because of the strong Christian, you know, structure in the country, they've been looked at skeptically in the sense that, you know, there are quite a number of sectors in the society that would look down upon Rastafarians, thinking, okay, they are unkempt because of the hair.
Yeah.
They smoke weed, you know, that kind of thing. Stay away from. But it's a culture that is definitely there. It's a culture that's obviously worked in our society in terms of the influence in music, in the youth,
And culture too,
in
not just
culture,
music,
yeah.
like the
So-
contemporary culture of the
So
people.
you find that now, fast forward to this day and age, we have so many young artists whose music is being now fused with you know, dub or reggae, you know, and they fuse with the native languages to bring out the stuff.
Fantastic.
So, and we've got a few Jamaican prominent reggae artists who
Visiting
are now
Sizzla, Kalonji.
visiting and
Kalonji
staying.
loves Zimbabwe.
Yeah, he actually got a farm. President Mugabe on his honeymoon with the Grace, he went to Jamaica. You know, that's where he spent his. For the first time, people had seen him without a tie and a suit. He was hanging out with Rastafarians in Jamaica. So
Just like Jerry Rollins did.
it's
These people
part
are
of
showboys.
yeah, and a lot of Rastafarians you can meet, you know, who are doing prominent stuff, having foundations and organizations helping out the community. So people are now realizing how peaceful, how innovative
Yeah.
Rastafari
Rastafari really is.
Yes,
Okay.
so-
All right, Daddy B, you are the captain of the 12 tribes of Israel, Ghana chapter of the 12 tribes of Israel, which is a Rasta mansion, if I can call it that. And I've visited your organization a number of times. I've actually done some work with your organization. One thing I picked from you is that you tell the youth in your organization that you don't have to grow the locks if you cannot grow the locks. Can you explain this to me? Like, what is the position of growing locks as a Rasta man or a Rasta woman? Hello?
Yeah, it seems Daddy B keeps going in and out. He's live from Ghana, so maybe
Yes, and he's in the northern part of Ghana at this moment, so that could also possibly be the reason why. But yeah, it's a very good point you made right there about people saying, you know.
Yeah, it was almost like a stereotype thing
It
where
is,
people
and it's like
thought,
that everywhere. It's not just in Zimbabwe.
Who are
Believe
these-
me,
yeah.
it's when I was growing up, I saw it myself. To the point where if you grow locks, even your family, it takes those who really love you
right
to
stick
actually
right.
stick with you. But that's the story of Bosco, because Bosco rose above that, and he actually became the programs manager for Ahumah FM, which is one of the stations under the multimedia
Right.
setup, and that is huge. I mean, you have to be in Ghana to know what I'm talking about.
Right,
But that was like a major breakthrough. Daddy Bosco. Hello, Daddy B.
Yeah, it seems like his line is still out, but
Hello.
hopefully-
Yeah, we're still having issues with Daddy Bosco. But yeah, like as I was saying, he kind of broke a major barrier for future generations who are not just Rastafarians or whatever you want to call them, but just people who want to be themselves and grow their hair long.
In fact, I forgot to mention, in Zimbabwe, they changed that word Rastafarian. It actually means something. They call it Rastafari. Rastafari. You know,
Yeah.
Farai means be happy.
Oh yeah?
Yeah,
In what
so-
language?
This is Shona. This is how people would refer the local Rastafarians, they would call them Rastafari. You know, it's kind of like it's Shona.
That's
it has a
very
meaning.
interesting. That's really interesting.
Or they would say Nastafara, meaning today we're happy. You know, so this is for a local Rastaman.
I see.
So
Wow, that's very interesting. But anyhow, the name Rastafari, I'm sure you know, is the name of Emperor Haile Selassie.
Right.
Before he assumed the coronation name Haile Selassie.
Right.
His birth name was Rastafari. And Tafari means head creator.
Oh, wow.
You know, so language and what it
Language
means to people.
plays tricks on our minds.
It is. But it's interesting to know that it has another meaning.
It has that meaning,
which is
you know.
which is also very exhilarating. Let's be happy, right, as a people. Bosco, are you on the line? Are you back? Hello, Bosco. Daddy B. Oh man, this is an example of the times when I hate technology.
Right.
You know, but all the same. Fungai, let's go back to that issue again that you were talking about Zimbabwe and Mugabe knowing doing what he's supposed to do, but the modalities. How
Well, I have the sense that people are obviously neutral in terms of, stuck between love and hate, because like what we've been discussing, in the long run, this land issue will be addressed, and sometimes you need radical means to make radical movements to do that. But the question of a lot of suffering for the locals, because Zimbabwe was an agro-based economy where they relied heavily on the farmers to produce, what Zimbabwe ate, fed on. And you'd find that the 1% owned most of the 80% of the land, which was the 1% white, Caucasian white farmers. So the equation needed to be recalculated, and it needed to be done. I don't know how fast, but it was overdue. People would say, okay, maybe Mugabe had strategically waited on the sidelines before aggressively going forward with it.
But it was in the
because
Lancaster Agreement.
It was, but it was 10 years after.
Yeah, and he waited 20 years.
After
he gave them an extra 10 years.
Yeah, but mind you, he was already in power, which was power. He was supposed to have served maybe a term and then maybe 2 terms. But after the 3rd term, there are questions where this was a strategic way to stay in power, to garner support. And anywhere you'd go, if somebody came and gave you land, I'm sure you'd support him to the death.
But let me ask you, Fungai,
Sorry, the number you dialed cannot be reached at the moment.
Is it easier to direct your aggression or your disgust or your disappointment or whatever towards Mugabe, who is trying to do something good for his people, or to direct it at the the powers that be, the powers who are maintaining the sanctions? Let me chip this in as well. The West was actually ready to pay for the land, as is being done in Namibia. Namibia is going through the same process.
Right.
Funds are being raised to buy the land back from these people to give to the locals. And that was the agreement until Tony Blair came and said, no, we're not going to pay. Why are people not blaming Tony Blair? Why are people blaming Mugabe?
Yeah. First of all, I don't know if you can call it aggression, but I think what it is what it is. You have to ask that question, because if that land indeed has been seized from the white farmers, the question is, who is it being given to? So if it means you are a ZANU-PF supporter and you are the ones that deserve that land, then that's a big question, because like I said before, it's about the land. So if that land is being distributed, but to only those that are in support of Mugabe, even if you oppose Mugabe, it becomes like you are the enemy, and that's not what it's supposed to be.
I've done a bit of personal research, Fungai. I've called people from Zimbabwe, and I have word that it's not necessarily the supporters of the ZANU PF who are getting the land. It's an open process where any Zimbabwean could go to the Ministry of Lands or whatever it is they call it and apply for land or apply for a farm or whatever.
I don't know which Zimbabweans you've been speaking to, but a lot of them, because we have family, we have friends, you know, their conditions, you have to be a party member, either show your party card, you have to have some kind of credentials to show what side you are on, and, you know, to be able to benefit. So I might think this is ridiculous, you know, for people to come up with such a claim, but he's publicly come out and reminded the people that go ahead, support the opposition, and the opposition is actually, you know, a puppet of, because Tsvangirai is considered the puppet of the West, and if you listen then again to what Tsvangirai is doing, was obviously trying to give an independent, different voice, you know, an impartial voice to what is going on.
But Tsvangirai doesn't seem to be addressing those key issues that a lot of Zimbabweans want to see addressed, like the land issue. Tsvangirai doesn't seem to have a clue what to do about that. Plus, there's word that his manifesto actually was written in the West and you know, imported by the MDC.
Yeah, well, I think this is a whole different topic where we can go into it and then say this was written where this was. But the basic factor is the majority of Zimbabweans are sitting in the dark right now as we speak. There's no electricity. It's not something that just happened yesterday. It's something that's been happening for so many years. And a lot of youth are unemployed with no a solution in sight. Even after the new
Ghana
election.
was the
right
first
now,
country
there's
south of the
indigenization,
Sahara.
and all these things are good words, good ideologies, but to whose benefit?
Yeah, I'm trying to draw your attention to something. Ghana was the first country south of the Sahara in Africa to get independent.
Right.
Up till now, there are people sitting in the dark.
So are we supposed to take champagne glasses and cling to that?
No,
or?
what I'm saying to you is that that is not something that Mugabe should take all the flack for.
Well,
especially with sanctions against him.
Yeah, but we're talking about the whole country. Zimbabwe was a breadbasket. We all know that. So we're talking about the situation, and then we can obviously go on and blame the West as how it's been, but then our actions after that, we have to find some kind of resolutions and solutions that are going to work for the benefit of the majority. So if it means indigenizing the whole thing, fine, but then does it mean that you have to be a party card holder?
I think it comes back to the modalities, how he's doing it.
Right.
So that is something
I do not know. That's been the question, how it's being done.
The how is the problem. Listeners and viewers, sorry for not being able to raise Daddy Bosco back on the line. Technology, I don't know what to say, but we couldn't raise Daddy B back on the line, but we have to go. But before we do, I'm praying you, producer, to please give me 3 more minutes, because there's something I really want to touch on with Fungai before we go. So, Fungai, number one, Libya.
Right.
You know, we don't have too much time, so let's keep it really simple. Mm-hmm. But Libya is sliding down. Libya was a haven, a paradise in Africa. Gaddafi had a solid plan for his people. We can go on and on and on,
right.
You know, about the social benefits that were there and everything. After he was removed, Libya seems to be sliding down a very deep abyss.
Right.
Tell me, what's your thought?
Well, obviously, after his death, there's never been any stability. So until that is achieved, ask me how, I'll tell you I don't know, because it's up to, obviously, to the Libyan people to do that. But there's been a history where, especially those money-hungry, greedy corporations and establishments out there like it that way, when there's a lot of instability, because that's when they thrive.
They can sell.
So yeah, I mean, it's been happening in the Congo, where even if the Congolese
same
children,
thing also seems to be
I mean,
happening.
in DRC, I mean, even if the kids are bare feet, hungry, somebody's making
benefiting from that.
Yeah,
definitely.
so we cannot dwell on that subject, like how long or why, but we obviously have a clue. You see, so as long as that confusion remains, other people.
I saw your report on the pro-Morsi demonstration in New York.
Right.
You think the same thing is going on in Egypt?
I think, well, sometimes it could be from country to country, but it could be the same thing, where sometimes, until a hand-picked leader from somewhere gets in the seat, then proper peace. But obviously the Egyptians are rising up, because I think they are not ready to have the military rule them after they first of all elected.
Fought so hard to
yes.
get rid of that.
Once that is done, how it's going to be achieved, maybe again they are looking for a savior.
Is there hope for Africa? Is there hope for Africa, or should we give up and just give up?
I think there is hope, in the sense that it's a continuous fight. People have to keep on, reminding each other to say, we're in this together, we have to come together, we have to hold hands, we have to keep mobilizing to do the right thing. So once there's that separation, that chaos, I don't know how you can bring peace, in that chaos.
Fungido, I would definitely like to pick up with you again, because as it were, Nick has given me more time, my producer,
Right.
but he's still waving to me over there, so we really
He
have
likes
to go.
waving, I noticed.
But anyhow, thank you so much, first of all, for sitting in for me, and then for occupying this other seat and, contributing to this.
Is
whole
that why they
discourse.
call it a hot seat? Because it's kind of
It's
like...
pretty hot in here.
Maybe it's the lights, no?
It's pretty hot in here. But before we go, what's the proper pronunciation for Zimbabwe? How do you pronounce Zimbabwe, in like originally?
Originally, it's called Zimbaremabwe, meaning the house of stone. And if you go down to Masvingo, which used to be Fort Victoria, it's on the west southern part of the country, there is a structure, a fort. And there's been squabbles historically where the Rosy people that built that Rosy dynasty, claim to be the the builders of that structure, and then I think it's the Greeks who were putting claim on it. So it's a structure, a fort that's got very thick walls made out of slate.
So
rock
the original
slate that was
pronunciation-
piled on top of each other with no mortar or anything. And this structure has survived hundreds and hundreds of years, and a lot of wars. And I'm talking about gun wars and everything, and spears and everything. But it's very high, very magnificent to look at, and just the presence of you.
So the actual pronunciation again is
Zimba, which is a big house, Remabwe,
Zimba
of stone.
Remabwe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in short, it's Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very
Listeners,
much.
viewers, this has been a cut and paste kind of edition of the program, but we still survive. Technology always poses a threat because, we have guests keep falling and dropping out and stuff like that. But yes, this is it. Until next week, when we come your way again with another edition of your favorite conscious vibes. This is yours truly, Jahbeloved, signing out with a tune called Now We Know from Judah Brownie. Now we know why the African leaders do what they do. See you next week. One love.
Yes, now we know. Yes, to the brownie and Fafa Food Palace music, no one want. Yes, now we know, now we know, now we know what they are fighting for, what the leaders are fighting for. Yes, now we know. Yes, now we know, now we know, now we know what they are fighting for, what the leaders are fighting for. I see them are fighting for the minerals and oil on the land. Fighting them are fighting for sustain corruption. Fighting because them think them have power in a hand. Fighting just to end up in a destruction. Well, listen to the African situation. Politicians kill the population just to win election. They rape and loot our resources, give the people and mash it up until them gone. Listen, me song.